Hello everyone and welcome to another reviews video tutorial. My name is Juan and today I'm going to be covering the topic impulse response functions and variance decomposition for VAR models. For those of you who are watching this video for the first time, I would like to let you know that there is a number 1 video where I show you first how to estimate a VAR model and how to conduct some diagnostics. So in this video, I'm going to show you how to display the impulse response functions and the variance decomposition. Recall that we are replicating Stock and Watson 2001 paper called Vector Autoregressions. You have the dataset and the link for the paper in the description of the video. Let's begin by talking about impulse response functions, also abbreviated as IRFs. Impulse response functions allow us to trace out the time path, current and future values of the variables in our model to a 1 unit increase in the current value of one of the VAR errors. In other words, what we are asking is what is the effect of a 1 unit shock in X on Y. In order to identify the impulse responses, a restriction is applied in the main matrix. EViews by default applies the Cholesky decomposition. The order of the variables play a key role as the restriction on the matrix implies that some shocks have no contemporaneous effects on some of the variables in the system. The order is established by the econometrician. However, economic theory and sensible assumptions are required to order the variables. So let's review now the Cholesky decomposition, which is the identification strategy that EViews uses by default, and it's also the identification strategy that Stock and Watson have used in their paper. So in here we have the main matrix. The first row works for inflation, the second row is for unemployment, and the last row is for the Fed's fund rate. So let's review the identification strategy. Unemployment and the Fed rate shocks have no contemporaneous effect on inflation. Inflation response is sluggish. This is the concept of sticky prices, where, for example, when there are changes in the Fed or in unemployment, they will have no contemporaneous effect in inflation. What this means is that it's going to take some time, it's going to take some periods for the Fed rate or unemployment to be able to impact inflation. Let's review now the second row, which is going to show the time path for unemployment. So we can see that Fed rate shocks have no contemporaneous effect on unemployment. Unemployment responds with lags to changes in the Fed rate, and this is what we can see here. This value, we can see that the Fed rate has no contemporaneous effect on unemployment. However, we can see that inflation has a contemporaneous effect on unemployment, and this is what's going to depict the Phillips-Core relationship. And finally, we have inflation and unemployment shocks have a contemporaneous effect on the Fed fund rate. As we can see, there are no restrictions, there are no zeros in this row. So that means is that the policymaker has current information of the economy to set the rate. This means that if unemployment or inflation changes, the Fed rate will respond in a contemporaneous way. We have talked about impulse response functions and the Cholesky decomposition. So now we are in a good spot to go into EViews and try to do this in the system. So recall that we had our model with the 3 endogenous variables, which were inflation, unemployment, and the Fed rate, and the model had 4 lags. We're going to go then into impulse, and here the following window is going to appear. We have first the display format section, where it's going to ask us how do we want to display the impulse response functions. Do we want this in a table, multiple graphs, or combined graphs? We're going to go with the option multiple graphs. Then we can report the standard errors in the impulse response functions. We can either ask EViews to not report anything, or we can ask to report them using some more Monte Carlo repetitions, or analytic asymptotic, which this is the default option and it's the most commonly used. Now we have display information. So in here it's telling us, okay, in what way do you want to show the impulses? We want to display the impulses for inflation, we want to see unemployment and the Fed rate. These are all the impulses. And the responses are going to be inflation, unemployment, and the Fed rate. The periods that we're going to be using for the model is going to be 24 because that's what the authors have used. So basically here in periods, you're going to put how many periods ahead you want the graphic to show the responses. Then we have here accumulated responses, which is an option that we're not going to select for now. We'll go into impulse definition. And what you can see here is that by default, as I have previously mentioned in the slides, EViews uses by default the Cholesky decomposition, the Cholesky identification strategy. In here, what we have is the ordering of the variables. Recall that it's really important the way that we order the variables, and some economic assumptions are required in order for the results to be sensible and make economic sense. So let's go now and hit OK. And here is going to report then our impulse response functions. So let's take a look quickly. In here we have the main diagonal, where it's going to be showing the effects of a shock of the variable to itself. For example, a shock of inflation on inflation, a shock of unemployment on unemployment, and a shock of the Fed rate on the Fed rate. However, we are more interested in seeing the cross results. In here, what we can see is the response of the Fed rate to a shock on inflation. So here what we can picture is inflation going up. How is the Fed going to respond? Well, they're going to increase the rate in order to control inflation. For example, in here we have the response of the Fed rate to a shock on unemployment. So if unemployment increases, the Fed is going to decrease the Fed rate. So that way they can get back to their steady state level of unemployment. What we can see in here, for example, is the response of unemployment to a one-time shock in the Fed rate. So if there is a positive shock on the Fed rate, this is if the Fed rate increases, unemployment is going to increase as well. And finally here we can take a look. I would like to mention this particular case, which is the case of a response of inflation to a shock on the Fed rate. Opposite to what we would expect is that when the Fed rate increases, inflation should decrease, but what we can see here is that in the short run, inflation increases. So this is a puzzling result, and it's an interesting result that many VAR models have encountered and kind of challenges and raises the question of whether VAR models are always appropriate to estimate models. Let's analyze the impulse response functions now with a bit more detail. The first thing that you should be wondering is what is the magnitude of the shock? And the magnitude of the shock is a one standard deviation shock. For example, when we are talking about a shock on the Fed rate, we are talking about a one standard deviation shock on unemployment. Then we have the red dots that are the standard error confidence bands. The confidence interval are computed as plus minus 2 standard error confidence band. So here we have the confidence intervals, and if these intervals are very wide, then what that is going to be telling us is that there is a lot of error in here in the estimates. The x-axis represents the periods. In this case, we were working with quarterly data. So we have here 5 quarters, 10 quarters, 15 quarters, and 20 quarters. And finally, the y-axis shows the percentage variation. So as an example, what we can see is that a one standard deviation shock on the Fed rate, we are talking about this particular graph, has a gradual positive effect on unemployment. As we can see after the first quarter, when the Fed rate increases, one standard deviation shock, then unemployment starts to increase after the first period, reaching a maximum percentage variation of 0.2 around the 8th quarter, and after the 8th quarter it starts to decrease until it reaches the steady state level around the 24th quarter. Just to show you briefly, in here we have the original paper, and we can see that, for example, all of these ones, the main diagonal, they all look alike. They are very close. And then the way that this works is the paper has kind of changed the order. It's showing the order in a different way, but you can see anyways that they all are similar. They all have the same behavior. You can take the time to compare them and see that they all respond in the same way. It's just they have changed the rows by columns. Yeah, so you will have to read this the way around. Like I said, for example, let's compare unemployment, a shock of inflation to unemployment. Yes, you have a shock of inflation to unemployment, and you see that it has this behavior as well. Then you see the shock of inflation to the interest rate, and we can see it has the same behavior. So again, like I said, you can take the time then to compare them and look how this works. So now let's go to the puzzling result. So again, the long run response of inflation to a shock in the interest rate does make sense. However, in the short run, we can see that after tightening the monetary policy, this is increasing the Fed rate, inflation still increases for some quarters. So the puzzling results have been obtained in diverse papers questioning limitations of VAR models. But what is going on? Okay, so some authors have pointed out that the policymaker, in this case the Fed, is setting the interest rate without observing future inflation signals. So again, they are setting the Fed rate, looking at past realizations, but they are not incorporating information expectations about inflation in the future. So is there any solution for this? Well, including commodity prices. Commodity prices can provide some insights about future inflation. For example, Sims in the paper in 1992 was the first author to verify that the price puzzle results tends to disappear by including commodity prices in the VAR model. But why? Well, again, like I just mentioned, commodity prices serve as an information variable which can help the Fed set the policy rate. So they are using the commodity prices, they are including it in the VAR model as an information variable. It's going to provide some signals about future expectations. So this is something maybe you may want to consider if you're setting a VAR model. You may be interested in incorporating commodity prices if you see that you have passing results. Now let's go to the variance decomposition. So the variance decomposition displays the percentage of the error made forecasting a variable over time due to a specific shock. So in other words, how much of the variability in the dependent variable is explained by its own shocks versus the shocks in the other variables in the system. So as in the impulse response functions, the variance decomposition applies the Cholesky decomposition for identification purposes of the main matrix as we have explained previously. So now let's go take a look at how we can display the variance decomposition in EViews. We are here back in EViews. We're going to go into View. We're going to go into Variance Decomposition. And here again, it's going to show how do you want these results in a graph, in combined graph, in stacked graphs. I have to say that the most commonly used are table and stacked graphs. Yeah, so I invite you to check then how stacked graphs look. But let's go with table. Table is going to be very informative. It's going to be very helpful, to be honest. So let's go with okay. This is also the way that the authors display the variance decomposition in their paper. And remember that we are trying to replicate all the results. So here what we can see is the variance decomposition of inflation. It's going to show you the effects of inflation, unemployment, and the Fed rate. So remember that we said that the variance decomposition is going to use that Cholesky decomposition, that Cholesky identification strategy, and recall that unemployment and the Fed rate had no contemporaneous effect in the first period on inflation. So that's why you can see that here is a zero and here is a zero as well. But if we take a look at the second period, we can see that variation in inflation is mainly due to, well, inflation in itself, but unemployment, for example, explains 6.78% on changes in inflation. And the Fed rate explains only 1%. But here, as we can see over time, we can see that the effects, for example, of unemployment over time increases. This means that changes in inflation have to do with unemployment. Then also we can see that the impact, the strength, yes, the effect of the Fed rate on inflation over time increases as well. We can scroll down and we can see that, for example, on unemployment, yes, in the first period, remember, because of the Cholesky decomposition, the Fed rate will have no effect. But we can see that over time, the Fed rate will have an up to 17% of explanation power. Sorry, even 19, sorry. of explanation power on changes for unemployment and inflation. You can see that again over time. If you see in the last period, it's going to have a lot of effect on changes in unemployment. And we can keep scrolling down, and we can see then for the last variable. Let's see if I can go a little bit up here. The Fed rate. We can see the variance decomposition of the Fed rate. Um, Again, this is how the variables over time will be affecting changes in the Fed rate. So let's go back now to our slides. In this slide, you can see on the left the results that we have estimated in our model. And here on the right, you can see a screenshot of the results in the original paper by Stock and Watson. You have here the variance decomposition. Like I said, here you have, for example, the first quarter, the period number 4, the period number 8, and the period number 12. And the reason why I have highlighted these periods is because those are the periods that the authors have reported in their paper. So I would like to invite you to replicate all these results. This is a good exercise for you to establish our model, to estimate it in the EViews, to obtain the results, and then to compare the results. So it's a really good exercise. I have included in the description of the video the links for the dataset and the links for the original paper. And also, if you're interested in having the slides, please let me know. I can send you the slides. There's no problem at all. Also, the last thing that I would like to let you know about the dataset is that the dataset is not the original that the authors have used. This is a dataset that I have looked for the variables in in different data sources, like can be the bank reserve, the Word dataset, the Word data bank. Sorry. So again, there might be some discrepancies in the result, but they would be minimal. You are going to get to very close and very similar results. The last slide that I have here is the structural bars. So I would just like to let you know that if you're working on a research paper for, I don't know, your master thesis or maybe for your undergrad thesis, what you should know is that there are different type of identification strategies that you can use on the main matrix of your model. Recall that we have used the short run restriction, that Cholesky decomposition, which is the one that EViews uses by default. This is the one that the authors have used in their paper. But there are also some other identification strategies, like for example the long run restriction by Blanchard and Quo from 1989. This is a very popular restriction imposed in the main matrix. And for example, another paper that has used this identification strategy is Anderson-Lee, 1997. And the main idea under the long run restriction is this concept of money neutrality. So it's this idea that nominal variables have no real effect on real variables, in the long run. So you cannot really affect real variables in the long run by, doing changes in nominal variables. And then the last one is sign restrictions it's a paper by Ulig in 2005. This is something you can take a look at. It's another identification strategy as well. You can have short run restrictions, long run restrictions, or sign restrictions. So I would like to thank you for watching this video. I would also like to let you know that I'm going to be uploading more content. We're going to be replicating different papers. So I invite you to subscribe to my channel. I invite you to give a like to this video if you found it useful. And also I have included a couple of videos using latex with overleaf. It's really important that if you're going to be writing your research paper, you write it using latex. And the reason for that is because your papers are going to look more professional. It's going to look more in the style that is used in the academics. So thank you very much for watching and have a nice day.